Our speaker is Dr. Ed Camp. Ed is an expert in fisheries and aquaculture governance. We've been doing Nature Coast Currents for 3 years now, and this is the third year that we've invited Ed. So we're really happy he's here and really happy um, that you guys will hear his presentation. Ed is an associate professor in the Fisheries and Aquatic Sciences program in the School of Forest, Fisheries, and Geomatics Sciences. He's an expert in the fisheries field as his service as the president of the American Fisheries Society, the Florida chapter. I think I got that right. And he's a true gator. He has both his master's and his PhD from the University of Florida and is now a faculty member in that department as well. So thank you, Ed, for being here. Thanks everyone for joining our webinar, and I will turn it over to you.
Very good. Thank you, Laura. This is correct. Screen is up. This is something that no matter how many years I've been on Zoom, I continue to mess up. Thank you for the kind introduction. Thank you for having me here. I've waited 3 years to be on Nature Currents. Thank you all for spending some time this afternoon and having a chat about the most exciting topic, which is obviously going to be socioeconomic stuff. I consider myself an integrated fishery scientist. I do a lot of quantitative modeling. Some of it's on the ecological side, some of it's on the socioeconomic side, some of it's sort of bringing them both together. Today, I'm going to focus mostly on the socioeconomic side. I have a really high extension appointment at University of Florida, and the reason that I mention that is that a big part of my job is doing outreach and extension work, providing information that maybe in itself isn't exactly peer review publishable, but can hopefully be really useful for decision makers, whether those are local county folks, state agencies, or federal agencies. So a lot of the stuff that you will see today kind of goes on in my extension side, where I work really closely with Florida Sea Grant. Okay, a couple quick disclaimers before I get into the actual talk. I'm focusing on recreational fisheries today, but it's not because it's the most important thing, it's because it's got to be focused somewhere, and we have really good data on recreational fisheries. Same token, I'm focused on the marine side again, not because the freshwater side doesn't matter, just because I have better data on the marine side, and I'm focused on the economic or the socioeconomic stuff today. It's not the only thing that matters. It's not even usually the most important thing, but it is important and we have good data on it. And it's actually an area where I think we have kind of a need for a lot more data. Those of you who know me know that I'm not actually an economist. I joke that I'm friends with a lot of economists. Some of those economists have very much helped me with the information you'll see here. I'm going to reference Krista Court a few times. Some of you know her. She's in food and resource economics at University of Florida. She works a lot on the market activity stuff that I'll tell you about today. I can't do the work I do with that without Krista. Krista is invaluable for this. The other thing that I need for the work I'll show you today is the NOAA fisheries data, and specifically the Marine Recreational Information Program, which I dislike using acronyms in talks, but I'm going to call it MRIP. That is what it's called. MRIP can be controversial. There are weaknesses to the MRIP data set. I will argue it is the greatest creel data set we have in the world. It's super neat, and I think we haven't even begun to tap the potential of what we can do with it from a research or an extension side. Okay, those are my disclaimers. Quick roadmap. It would always bug me when I didn't know where a talk was going to go. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's an angler dynamic, a bit of economic background, but it's going to be very brief. It won't be very fun. That is a lie, but it will be brief. Then I'm going to get to the more fun part, which is socioeconomic data. I'm going to focus on a single county today so you can see the type of stuff we can do. And I've picked Levy County for reasons. And then a little bit of challenges and opportunities, and then time for questions if there is time for questions. A request is if there's anything that while I'm talking, you're just like, hey, I don't understand that, put it in the chat. If you don't want other people to know that you don't understand it, you can, I think, probably just send a message to me and I will view it, I think, when I stop sharing my screen, and I will not tell people whose question it is if you don't want anybody else to know they asked the question. But it's really valuable for me to know what things just don't make sense. If you hear me saying something, you're like, I don't understand what this person is talking about, please tell me that. Like, I exist in a weird little silo. I sit in an office by myself for the most part every day. And sometimes things that make a ton of sense to me just don't translate. And it's really important for me to understand when that is. Quick background on recreational fisheries. Today, I'm going to use the word recreational fisheries and anglers interchangeably. That works for the most part for Florida. It really doesn't work for a lot of other areas in the world. Anglers is technically hook and line fishing, usually for fun, but there's this whole big fuzzy thing about, well, you can use a hook and line to catch fish for food or for cultural connection to nature, all of these things. Just understand that that's actually a big and pretty interesting question. There's entire cultures to whom the concept of recreational fishing doesn't make any sense. I'm just going to use these terms interchangeably today. I talk about modes a little bit. These are types of recreational fishing as used specifically to that NRIP data set. And so it's going to include things like, I'm checking time here. They're going to include things like shore-based fishing. Okay, so this person is not fishing from shore. So shore-based fishing is one mode. You're on a beach, you're on a jetty, a pier. Then there's for hire fishing. That's with you're a guy or you're fishing with a guide, with a captain, with a party boat. No guide would do something this silly. And then there's private or rental vessel. This is what we often think about. These are people fishing in their own boats, and a canoe would count, or a boat that they've rented. And that's what we think about a lot, although it's not always the most common type. I don't get today at all into motivations, which are the reasons that people might want to go fishing, like challenge versus nature versus seeing your friends. So quick background. Anglers just equals recreational fishers for today, but it's going to be broken down into pretty much how you're fishing in these three categories. Okay, two text-heavy slides are on their way, but for the most part, it's not that bad. I'm just going to go over what I mean by these things, like with angler dynamics, give you some examples, say where it fits in the disciplines, why it's useful, and I love like pseudo taxonomy, so I'm going to give you one of those. Angler, again, recreational hook and line fisher, and dynamics could literally be anything. It's basically their behaviors and the results. So this is a whole bunch of words that people might talk about when they're talking about angler socioeconomic dynamics: site choice, target species, effort, catch rates, harvest, et cetera, et cetera. The reason I bolded effort here, it's one of the things that we can usually measure okay, and it's really important. A lot of these other things are related to effort in some way, but either they're going to be hard for us to measure, or they're actually just sort of flow into effort. But effort is the one that I focus on a lot. In the literature, if you see the term angler dynamics or dynamic angler, a lot of times it's actually referring to a specific type of modeling, which means you're using mathematics to describe the choices that fishers in your model are making. I'm not focused on that today for the talk. It's something I do. You're going to find this type of angler dynamic information in fisheries and economics and human dimensions or sociology and in interdisciplinary literature. Angler dynamics are important ultimately because they're describing people and their happiness, which is on first principle something that we care about. And it's also describing the effects of management or governance actions, which matters quite a bit. And then obviously describing sort of the state of economy. So these things all do matter to us. And this is what I meant by taxonomy. There's sort of three broad groups that you're going to see angler dynamic stuff in. One is empirical studies, and these are going to be things like, hey, where did the people come from when they fished for this fishery? Or what were their catch rates? You know, what is the actual statistical distribution of catch rates, which that may not sound riveting, but it's very interesting to me. What are their preferences? Then there's these simulation studies that I mentioned earlier, and these are like what if questions, saying like, okay, what if we stocked more snow? What if we built an artificial reef that GAG used? What if we had a big harvest closure? What if we implemented harvest tags? What would happen then? And these are evaluating management actions and trying to understand the likely and unlikely outcomes of things, and they require assumptions about the way that people will behave. And then there's applied socioeconomic data, which is actually what I'm focusing mostly on today. And these are sometimes studies like research papers, and sometimes they're just information that can be useful. And they're often describing what is, like what is the value, what is the impact, what is the contribution, all of those types of things. So I need to tell you a little bit about economic background. This is the not fun, but short part. Obviously, economics matter because people, including elected officials, make decisions based off economics, but they also tell us something about the way people behave, sort of on first principles, like, hey, how do you make that decision? Did you really care about this fish, or did you care more about where you were fishing? And they also help us understand human behavior in applied terms, like, oh, what if we do this? What if we change the season for gag grouper and we decrease it by 80%? Will there be 80% less effort or not? That depends on the economics here. Within economics, though, there's a massive split. There's this value and then there's market activity. And these things get conflated all the time by fisheries researchers like myself. So if you hear nothing else, like literally, if you just tune out the rest of this talk, like please, please, please take this home. Value and market activity are different things. Value is benefit to society. It's going to use terms like satisfaction, utility, consumer surplus, actual revenue on like a commercial side. It uses a bunch of approaches like stated preference surveys, revealed preference approaches. You'll have willingness to pay here, contingent valuation, all these types of things. If you talk about ecosystem service values, non-use values, existence values, option values, all on this side here. And then there's market activity. Market activity has to do with spending. It's a net neutral to society. It's dollars changed for a good, right? Like I used to have $5, now I have 5 fewer dollars, but I have a pack of Z-Man lures. Like it's neutral. It uses terms like economic impact, economic contribution. These are not value. These are not benefit to society. Some of you have heard me use this example before. The event in my lifetime that probably had the greatest economic impact in the Gulf of Mexico was the Macondo oil well blowing up. Massive economic impact, not massive value for society. Market activities uses input-output analysis. It gives you metrics like expenditures, total outputs, jobs. The reason I call it a paradox and a paradox is because on the one hand, it's not as academically fascinating to researchers because it's kind of like accounting. On the other hand, it's a thing that a lot of people care the most about, especially when you start talking about jobs and expenditures. But then the paradox within that is that it does grab those headlines. It lets you say the things like, you know, recreational fishing is a $9 billion industry within Florida. That's market activity. But what it seems to imply is that, well, if something happened to recreational fishing, we would lose all these jobs and we would lose all of this market activity. And that's not strictly necessarily the case, because would the spending go away, or would people just spend it on something different? Would they spend it on a different fishery if they can't put the money into the gag fishery? Would they spend it on a different activity if they can't go fishing? Is it a loss to society if some of those monies are saved as opposed to spent? So it is both fascinating and important, and maybe also a little bit overstated, in my opinion. This concludes your brief economics lecture by someone who's not an economist. Here's the fun part where I show you some data from Levy County. I'm going to talk to you about where people come from when they fish a county, what they try to catch there, how efforts change over time, has that different if you look at the different modes, maybe some seasonal patterns, and finally the economic contribution. I'm focusing on Levy County today. I, with help from my colleagues, make county-specific reports for every coastal county in Florida, with the exception of Jefferson County, again, for reasons, for all this information. So if you want that, I can put links in the chat later when I stop sharing my screen, and I can more easily see the chat about where to get these reports. You can obviously contact me if you want them or if you want to talk more about them, but we're doing Levy County today. Where do people come from when they come from out of state to fish Levy County? These are dollars from outside of Florida coming inside of Florida. And what I can show you here is like, here's Levy County and these columns here on the right, you know, so it's mostly coming from Georgia and then some Midwest and southern counties. But I put these other columns in here so you can see, how does Levy County compare to out-of-state trips in the Big Bend overall? How does it compare to Florida overall? You see these not available. These are generally international folks, right? So what you can say is, well, compared to some other areas like the Big Bend, Levy County is pulling a bit more from the South and the Midwest. Why is this information useful? If you are promoting fishing related tourism, tourism-based fishing, whichever way you see it, you need to know where to put your advertisements in. This information is here for free for every coastal county in Florida. It can be useful for local governments trying to understand, okay, like how do we actually, where's our competitive advantage compared to our county neighbors? But a lot of this is specifically to inform fishing-based tourism, which tourism is the greatest market activity of any sector in Florida, I believe. Okay, we can also ask questions, say, okay, but what if the in-state people, where are they coming from? Because, Levy County cares about dollars from outside of Levy County coming into Levy County. Well, Alachua loves to fish in Levy County. This is fascinating. Levy County's fun. It's one of the only counties that if you said from any origin, there's actually more people fishing Levy County who live in Alachua County than there are in Levy County. That's like almost unheard of, that you have more out-of-county people fishing than in-county folks. Again, this type of information can be useful for TDCs and for advertising, but also sort of for local government determining fees and access. So like if we have a ramp fee that depends on whether you're, for example, a local resident or not, these types of numbers might be useful for you to know, like, well, how many people are we getting from out of resident and where else might they go? We can actually drill down farther, so we can even look at specifically little maps and see where the people coming from. So this square here is a poorly drawn, I mean, not poorly, but it could be better, of Levy County. And what it shows you is actually like, it's Gainesville. It's the Alachua County folks that are really going to Cedar Key. And there's more folks from Marion that are going over to Yankeetown. That's what you can see on these maps here. It's just mapping where people are coming from using county centroids and stuff. And we don't need to get into that, but this is what we can pull out of these data, which I think is neat. Okay, so this is exactly the same slide I showed you before. What counties are they coming from when they fish Levy County? But we can subset these data and say, well, I just care about the for-hire trips, the people fishing with guides. Okay, so look at these numbers. It's technically more in Alachua County, but 24 and 24%. If you look at the for-hire sector, that's a big change. It's a lot of people who are fishing in Levy County from Gainesville. Am I saying that this is professors who maybe aren't very good at fishing, but would like to have photos taken with it? I don't know why I would say that. I wouldn't even suggest that. There's a lot of people from Alachua County who go to Levy County to fish with a guide or on some type of for-hire vessel. Type of information you can get. Yeah. What do people fish for when they go to Levy County? So if you know the fishery, you kind of know this already. This is information that, again, can be useful for some of the advertising, like what fish pictures you're going to put in your advertisements. There's a advertisement I saw of, like, I think it was Fish Cedar Key, and had a picture of either a wahoo or a sailfish. I might be getting that wrong, but it was like a billboard. Fascinating. So no target here. This is people just saying, well, I'm fishing for whatever's biting. And that's actually, in many counties, that's the dominant type of fishing, is people who are quite casual anglers. After that, you see redfish, and then you see spotted sea trout, and then way down here is everything else. And so it's interesting because sometimes this doesn't always feel real to me, but I have to remember, like, I'm in a weird little subset of people who put a lot of their thought into fishing. And so, I might be really interested in snook over in Cedar Key and like pretty interested in other stuff like triple tail or flounder, and those things aren't even cracking, the top 10 here, which, well, yeah, triple tail and flounder are. Flounder's probably on me. That's a silly thing to target. We can also do this again for the for hire, so you can just see, yeah, this is really dominated by your species. One of the reasons this types of by your redfish and sea trout species, your inshore species. One of the reasons this is interesting is if there is management regulations that you think might affect fishery here, these are data that can say, hey, this might really affect our for hire quite a bit because, they're focusing on these species. And so a change here might really matter to these folks. Another type of data, how has effort changed over time? Everything I showed you before was actually using intercept data, and I didn't explain where it was coming from. If you want to ask me questions, certainly feel free to do that in a bit. But here we're actually using the estimates. And so this shows Levy County, all of the modes and areas. And what you see here is actually surprising variability to have the overall effort, fall for, about a decade and then kind of come up and then fall again and then bounce around. So this is interesting to me. I would be curious to explore this more and understand, what's driving this. And I don't know Levy County that well, so this is where I would go talk to somebody who does, one of my colleagues like Savannah or Laura, and try to understand, hey, does this make sense to you? What's going on? This is information that may be useful to scientists if they're looking for like local management. It may be useful to local governments if they're trying to figure out like, hey, what's going on? Do we have an issue with people not wanting to come here? It may help people even plan for some economic shifts that are going on. We can also break this down by the different modes. And what you see here is that some of these modes are not real common in Levy County, and shore-based is going to be one of them. When you see this absence of confidence intervals here, that's none of the light blue stuff. It means that we're pretty unconfident about some of these years in here, and it's not shocking. You can also see that the for hire has increased a bit, but it's been spotty. It's been changing. And so this is not actually a really common plot for Florida. In a lot of places, Florida, we have much better accuracy, precision on the shore-based trips, and the number of trips are much higher. The Big Bend region is kind of unique in that there's not a lot of shore-based fishing there. There's not none, right? So like these are, it's still substantial. It's just that there's big error bars around it, which I think makes sense. You can also look at patterns. And again, we have kind of an unusual pattern, like seeing really strong effort in March and May, but not April is weird. This is pooled over like the last 5 years. This isn't super flashy. So like, I don't put the confidence intervals on here, but I don't think this is just basically noise. I think that for whatever reason, April and August are not big months in Levy County, which again, very interesting to me. It may be useful even to the public if they're trying to figure out, well, you know, what's going on there, and also when can I go when it's not crowded. Okay, and here's sort of our crescendo, which is the economic contribution. I am going to talk a little bit more about how we get these. To get these, you get the estimates of trips by mode. You basically multiply it by expenditures per trip, which is coming from NOAA by mode. And then you run it through InPlan, which is a proprietary, i.e. not free, input-output analysis program. It's the dominant one that's used. This is where Krista Court really helps me with to make sure that this is done right so that we're not getting egregiously overblown numbers. And what it can tell you is here's the total number of jobs when you account for multipliers and these different levels of spending, which I will not get into because I said that the economic lesson would be brief. You can say, okay, there's 464 jobs in 2024 depended on or were contributed by recreational fisheries in Levy County with a total output of about 45, 46 million, which is big, you know, those are big numbers. These are the numbers that people like. They often get called value, they're not. But they are important, and this information might be really useful for outreach extension folks who are trying to demonstrate, hey, here's why my work supporting this industry is really important to this county. Here's why it really matters that we have really good sustainable habitat to make sure we support the fish populations that are going to support this type of economic sector. I think these numbers are the ones that translate the most outside of academia. Elected officials, industry reps, lobbyists, I think these are the numbers that play, that the numbers that get asked for the most, and we can get them, which I think is pretty neat. Okay. Challenges and opportunities. I've told you about the stuff that we can get, should we get it. So what's the future of marine recreational fisheries dynamics? You know, will effort overall keep increasing? Now, Levy County, it's actually been seesawing a bit, but again, that's a bit uncommon. A lot of places effort just keeps creeping up and up and up. Will that be sustainable? Will we run out of places for people to fish? Will we run out of people to fish? Are we recruiting enough people in the demographics that are growing the fastest in Florida? I've not done this for reasons, but the demographic information of saltwater fishing license holders is publicly available in Florida. So you can grab it and you can see how old they are, what race and ethnicity that they are, and what sex gender they are. And it's probably not going to shock you who it is. And is that the demographic that's growing the quickest in Florida? No, it's not. So if certain places want to make sure that they ensure a lot of economic contribution into the future, are we recruiting the people who we're right now missing? And that's an open question. Another open question is how will the ecosystems and the fish populations handle more fishing if it goes on? Do we have room in our current regulations, our traditional sort of size bag harvest season to allow big increases in effort at the same time that we're also having changes in catchability because technology is going up and people are being able to access fish more often, more types a year, and target fish in different ways? Are there new options for management exist? More place-based stuff, more rights-based stuff even, and critically, is there support for using them? These are questions I'm obviously not answering because they'd be a pretty big topic, but these are some of the questions that I'm most fascinated about, and I think that we can start to look at with some of these angler dynamics. Where they often wind up, which I alluded to in the last one, is are we going to, at some point in time, move to spatially explicit, diversified strategies for managing fisheries, or are we going to do one size fits all? In freshwater fisheries, there's a lot of spatially diversified strategies saying, hey, this is a trophy bass lake. This is a trophy trout section. This is a wild trout section of this stream. This is a catch and release only zone. This is an area that we stock really heavily because people like to fish it a lot and we want to make sure that they have access to it. All of that is really common on the freshwater side, and it's remarkably uncommon on the marine side. What we see more on the marine side is one size fits all. In Florida, that's moved a little bit in the last few years where we've gone to more regional management, but that's changed most dramatically with the harvest seasons, often still uses the same size and bag, although not always. So there's pros and cons of this, which again, I won't get into, but I will tip my hand and say that I think that this is an area where counties could really distinguish themselves to create fisheries that are really recognized and known around the state and outside of the state and even internationally by thinking really strategically about how can we create a different type of experience here. Someone might not be able to get it somewhere else. It's not only the county's purview to do that, right? Like this is FWC, Division of Marine Fisheries Management. They're the folks that ultimately have to set these rules. And so those conversations really start and end with FWC. But these are things that in the literature, I think are fascinating. And at least there's in the literature the potential for some really interesting stuff to be done in this type of spatial management. Finally, I'm just going to put this out there because I think it's really interesting. All of the spatial management sounds really good, and in the literature, there's tons of papers lauding for how great it is and everything, but it's not immune to problems. You could imagine scenarios where counties even compete to attract the most fishers in the short run, and this is basically just scaling the tragedy of the commons from the individual level to the county level. And I think that would be really a tragedy, so I hope that doesn't happen. So even though there's a part of me that thinks there's a lot of fascinating things with basically spatial explicit management and zone, there's other stuff that we want to pay attention to as well, especially if counties are looking in the short run of like, okay, what attracts the most anglers to me compared to my neighbors? That is my talking. I would love to talk with other people and hear what you guys think and what you're interested in, and answer any questions. I can see, as you will see, that a poll has popped up. I will not close this poll. Just going to move it around a little bit. Hopefully you will answer the poll. Yes, Laura?
Yes, yes. The poll is up there. Please fill it out. If you have any questions, feel free to type them to the chat. You can also unmute yourself and ask Ed questions directly.
I think I'm going to stop sharing if that's okay. I'll reshare
Yeah,
something about
Absolutely.
something, but I think that that would be more fun to stop.
Yeah.
well, I can ask a question while people are filling out the poll. Because you might have said it, but I just want to make sure that everybody knows that this information is available for more than just Levy County, right? So do you want to maybe tell people how they could find this information for their county?
Yeah, I'm not sharing anymore. I actually did plan for this, so I have a link here that I will put in chat. This is a webpage that Krista Court maintains, and it has all of our reports for individual counties on it. So it should be in the chat box now. It doesn't have the 2025 reports yet, but I did just complete them. The data that you saw today has been seen by very few other people. That'll be up there really soon. But all of these things are publicly available for Florida. They're all over there. Also,
Does this tools go by regions or just by counties?
what I have up there is by counties. I do have the scripts to make region-specific things. I just usually don't do them because they wound up not being as popular, but I absolutely have them. So if you guys want them and it's like, hey, I need something for the Nature Coast, Indian River Lagoon, whatever, we can do that. I will also add that after working with Krista and some other folks at Division of Marine Fisheries Management, we were actually able to develop some species-specific economic contribution stuff, which I wasn't sure if it would be a pain in the neck to do, but we could do it. So what we were able to do, like on the East Coast, for example, was to be able to say, hey, here's this whole suite of, of species. How many jobs depend on them? So we can do that, and that can be paired even with regional stuff if that's important. It takes a little bit more time, and I have to try to make sure that I don't accidentally make little mistakes and stuff, but it absolutely can be done by region, and we can drill down now and also get it by species. We just have to be sensitive that there are, as we get smaller and smaller, the precision on the amount of effort gets usually less. So if you said, I need to know what the economic contribution in Levy County was of flounder fishing, like we're not going to get a good number for that, right? Because there's very few people who are silly enough to go try to do that. But for species that are really popular, like redfish and sea trout, especially if it's in a region, multiple counties, we can do that.
Can you tell me how that's different than just what your how the differences in targets per county?
Yeah. The targeting information that I showed you at first is not actual estimates of the number of trips. What I do is I pull the intercept data coming from NOAA Fisheries MRIP over a long enough time period that after checking, it's pretty representative of what the actual effort is. But technically speaking, that targeting stuff is the percent of trips intercepted that targeted species X or Y. Now, what that means is that if there's something weird, like, for example, say all of the people who target flounder in Levy County own a dock, a private dock, so they're not using public areas, we'd actually systematically miss them. It's hard for me to imagine those types of things really playing out, especially over longer periods. But there's a little bit of a difference there. The effort estimates that I showed you today, these were not species specific. We can get species specific effort estimates, and that's what I need to run the contribution. So if you said, hey, I need to know where your how much contribution is associated with your sort of inshore species in county X, then I need to actually estimate the effort. And if I do that and I see that the coefficients of variation or the percent standard error are kind of junk, then I'm probably not going to do it. I'm going to tell you, look, we can do it, but we shouldn't put confidence in these numbers because they're too uncertain. It's a huge benefit of working within the NOAA MRIP system because it's an estimator-based sampling program that has a lot of the stats built in a way that would be really difficult for us to do on the back end of it.
There was a question in the chat that I think you answered at the same time, but I'll read it in case you want to add anything. But where does the data about things like targeted species come from?
How this system works, and I skimmed over this because I didn't want to get bogged down in it. NOAA Fisheries runs the Marine Recreational Information Program. That program runs an angler intercept survey where they talk to people coming back from fishing trips. How that works is federal dollars, more or less from Sport Fish Restoration and other funds, fund state agencies usually to send actual creel people out to ramps, to beaches, to piers. And they just ask you when you're done fishing, like, hey, what were you fishing for today? Where did you come from? All these questions. They're not law enforcement. You've probably seen them at some of the ramps. Like there's a couple people that have like seen sporadically, like every couple of years for like a decade now. And it like makes me so happy when I see them because I'm like, I love your data. Like I use it. Yeah. So I've run into folks like DNR employees in Wisconsin. Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of states will also run these programs that are state management agencies. even though sea grant exists in the Great Lakes states, and so there's a component of NOAA that's operating some of those as well, the MRIP data system is not available for the Great Lakes, which is sad for me because it'd be really fun. But basically, they're going to be FWC people, non-law enforcement, who are going to be actually asking people, hey, what'd you fish for? What'd you catch? Where'd you come from? All these stuff.
Cool. Does anybody else have any questions for Ed? All right. Well, this is really cool. I think that I am just ideas are swimming. I don't know how to articulate all of the questions I have, and I don't want to dominate the conversation. But this is really cool. It's a really impressive tool, and if anyone needs Ed's contact information, feel free to reach out to me or Savannah, and we can put you in contact with him as well.
Thank you so much, Laura. Thank you, Savannah. I put a link for the EDIS on market activity stuff up here. EDIS is a little non-peer-reviewed publication we write. The economic stuff is complicated and it takes me a long time to try to understand, and I don't understand perfectly. If you want more information, I put it in the chat, which should be recorded, so you can go find that. But they're also easy to Google. If you just look up economic market activity camp EDIS, you will find it.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks everyone for coming. Our I closed my window, so I can't tell you what our what our next webinar is, but I hope to see you guys there.
April 16th, oyster catchers.
Thanks, Savannah. Bye, y'all.